Hey everybody. I was looking online and I got a question for you. Do you think making an online version of what was supposed to be originally after Worlds Collide or even before Worlds Collide or whatever, um, do you think doing an online comic like the UK Fleetway Sonic the comic is going to help out? See, apparently there's a group of people over at BumbleKing.com that feel if they do that are basically working on the idea of doing an online Sonic comic that basically showcases what Ian Flynn originally was going to do. And when I read this, I'm thinking it sounds like a good idea because at least it gives fans like myself an alternative to say, okay, to see exactly, okay, what would have been. But the only question a lot of people are going to have is, would anybody be interested in it? I mean, I would be interested, flat out I would be. Because again, it gives you an alternative to see, okay, this is what we're getting officially, but here's what would have been. It's kind of like with Season. We're basically, you have a lot of people working on the Season webcomic as well as trying to work on the Season animation portion of it to kind of give you an idea of what Season 3 would have been. So that's basically what's going on there. I'll provide a link to that if you want to. Now, if you want to read it. Now, I also read up, and I talked about this in a video. Basically, Ben Bates has revealed originally what the ideas were for Sally and her Mecha Sally design. Now, I talked about it in part 1, what the initial roboticized version was and what he was planning to do. He also added part 2, and I mentioned that in the description box. I think I even provided a link to that. Maybe I didn't. But basically he talks about this in part 2. And he gives basically a whole page worth of sketches. And I'm trying to see if I can get this here. Here we are. And this is what he says. This is what Ben Bates says. This is what Ben Bates says. And I quote. Ben says, and I quote, he did this about 1 day and 20 hours ago. 1 day and 20 hours ago. This is what he says, and I quote, basically 40 hours ago. This is what he says, and I quote. Weaponized Mecha Sally. This one took a lot more time and a lot more doodling. When I started the design, I didn't know what weaponizing her actually meant. All I knew was she transformed into a stronger robot. I suppose I thought there was some very specific plans for what she would do and how it would relate to the story. And those details would eventually influence the design decisions. While I waited to find that out, I had a vibe in my mind I wanted to explore, which is what all the top sketches are. The dark red trim band around the bottom of her hair with the low pointed bangs gave me an idea to imply the shape as a sort of hat, giving her a potential evil military officer vibe. Looking through the sketches there, I guess I started toying around with a big arm cannon, which looks cool. And it didn't take long to messing around with a powerful laser cannon inside her head/hair, which I'm happy to say became one of her actual weapons used in the comic. As you can see in the color sketches, Sally has very few pieces of metal with fur Sally has very few pieces of metal with her fur tone. Knowing that this design would influence her de-roboticized design down the road gave me the opportunity to start familiarizing the reader with a Sally bearing less fur. I sent these ideas off and was given the direction to try a sleeker body design. Editor Paul Kaminsky also stated an interest in designing signature weapons for her, and I'm pretty sure he pacified the idea of her. I'm pretty sure he pacified the idea of arm blades, which were super tough to figure out. I wanted something simple, something that could conceivably be used by an actual enemy in the games. Although it could vary throughout the last 20 years, Sonic bad guys usually fall into a fun and cartoony design approach. They attack with light bulbs or launch spikes at you. More lethal threats tend to be laser beams, missiles, and bombs. Getting away from Eggman's robots, the character's powers and attacks tend to also be simple and unique. Curling up into balls, or a big hammer, or maybe throwing a giant shuriken. I wanted to bend these arm blades over into that kind of thinking as much as I could. Just because I could do anything I wanted to didn't mean I wanted to go for the easy solutions. I wanted it to fit in and be right. What would it look like if Metal Sonic had arm blades? Unfortunately, I don't think Metal Sonic's arm blades would look anything like what I came up with. These are too straightforward, too generic. The energy blades are kind of fun, I suppose, but they're still not quote-unquote there. I did these drawings 2.5 years ago, and I could see what I might do differently now to come up with a better idea, but I don't want to beat myself up too much about it. I was designing these 3 forms of Sally all at the same time. After all, my mind was thinking about a lot of stuff. So from there I did the turnaround, and right at the end Paul had the idea to use power rings as her power source and add a compartment to her back. Her chest is very small, and I wasn't sure how big power rings were supposed to be, but you can see my suggested solution if there was a size discrepancy. To be totally honest, when I was working on the Sonic comics, I read every issue to stay up to date. But around the time Sally was weaponized, I started doing work on Mega Man, and then eventually for other comic companies, and put the story on hold. I've got all the issues stacked up for any future reference. But I realize I haven't read anything after issue 232. Was the Power Ring backpack ever shown in the issue? Oh yeah, and if you notice, the backpack is a slightly modified Dreamcast. So because I jumped over to Mega Man, I never got the chance to draw a weaponized Mecha Sally story. It was something I really felt I missed out on. Luckily, during the Worlds Collide arc, I got to spend at least one little moment with her. The last few images are some of my favorite stuff. Her attacks and powers. It was a pleasant surprise to learn that I could design her weapons. Aside from Paul's suggestion about the arm blades, I thought it would be cool if she used lightning and tried to think of what attacks she could have in the game. The first image is her using a lightning shield to block attacks. I don't know if the lightning shield has ever been used in the comics before, but if not, more game elements added, haha. I thought she could also capture other characters in the shield. So that's basically his explanation on the weaponized Mecha Sally design. And quite honestly, it's very interesting. It's a very interesting read. I'll provide a link down below so you guys can read it. But also, again, I ask of you, but again, I do ask of you guys, What are your thoughts on possibly, on the idea of possibly doing the online comic version of what would have been, originally planned for after Worlds Collide, or even if Worlds Collide hadn't occurred? What are your thoughts on that idea? I'll provide a link to that as well as to what Ben Bates had to say about the Sally redesign in his second part. Ben has not posted part 3 yet. I guess he's waiting for Sally's official re-debut in a few weeks. So let me know what you guys think about both those situations, and leave a comment below, do a video response if you can, and I'll talk to you all later.